Scores a level. It was a 2-point shot. So again, North Melbourne will have the last play in this first period of overtime. McDonald can win the game for North Melbourne. So it's come down to the last shot again.
He's got to go. He's got to go.
McDonald.
He wants to draw the foul.
Up goes the shot. Makes it.
What a shot.
And the game is over. McDonald has won the game for North Melbourne on the buzzer in the first period of overtime.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is NBL Rewind as we look back in the classics that Great League has given us over plenty of times. Now, if you're listening to us right now and you've watched it, you're going to know exactly and tune in and get involved. Hashtag NBL Rewind on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, whatever you want. However you want to get involved, make sure you do after watching the classic, the game one of the 1994 Grand Final series between the Giants and Adelaide. We're going to get to that very shortly. Liam Santamaria is here. And if you haven't watched it, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, every way to get a hold of it. Hello to you, Liam.
Hello, Cam. Yep, one of the all-time great games, one of the all-time great finishes. And what a Cinderella story the Giants were that year.
This game, and this is what happens when you do these type of things, you go back and you look at the game and you spoke about an NBL overtime the other day, the amount of high-quality Australian representatives or long-term imports, and we'll get to that shortly, that are in this game is second to none. And remarkably, there are so many things you forget about a game until you hit rewind and watch it. And there's about 7 things that slapped me right in the face. So we're going to get to all that very much more very shortly. Just quickly, rewind on the actual season. Andrew Gaze was the MVP. Talking rewind, it just feels like it's pause, repeat, play when it comes to Drewy winning MVPs. The All-Star 5, and this is a wonderful year. Of course, Darryl McDonald, who we're going to talk a lot about very shortly, Andrew Gaze, Leroy Loggins, Mark Bradkey, and in my opinion, the best dunker that has ever played in the NBL, Leon Trimingham, who was a part of that Sydney Kings team with Mario Donaldson, only for a short time in the mid-90s. Leon Trimingham, all-NBL first team. He was brilliant, both as a player and above the rim. I think there was a game in Geelong at 11 dunks.
Is that right?
So he just went nuts. I loved him. I love him.
What a list that all-NBL first team was that year. D-Mac, Gaze, Loggins, Trimingham, Bradkey, 5 absolute legends of the league. And you talk about the MVP. Geez, D-Mac might have been a bit stiff.
Would have been a bit stiff. He was rolled, and no one loves Andrew Gaze more than you and I. But how Darryl McDonald, who led this team to a championship, which is sometimes irrelevant, I understand, but led him to the minor premiership and did what he did, how he wasn't the MVP, still boggles the mind.
Yeah, I mean, that Giants team, let's talk about them for a minute because I mentioned Cinderella's story. This team barely scratched through to even exist for the 1994 season. Following the 93 season, they were really going to be wound up, and at the 11th hour, they got saved. And obviously a new look. They brought out that teal uniform, which I'm sure we will talk about.
That's what I always say, Liam Santamaria. If you can pick yourself off the canvas and you're ready to get kicked out of the league, and you're able to somehow get through, just change your uniform and good things will happen. You know what? Obviously, we're going through some interesting times with the Hawks. Maybe they want to go to teal and good things might happen in NBL 21.
Oh, I think people forget how close they came to not existing prior to that season. They come out and win the title. And so much of it was on the back of their new recruit, Darryl McDonald, obviously, who came out and just killed it.
Now, and we'll get to how these two teams got there very shortly. There was 2 very interesting semi-final series, and one thing happened in a semi-final series with Adelaide that probably in particular changed game 1, which we'll get to shortly. But before we get to all of that, what are your recollections of the 94 season when both you and I were just really starting to fall in love with ball?
Well, obviously the 2 other Melbourne teams had won the 2 previous years, right? The Magic in 92 and the Tigers in 93. Those 2 teams were playing out of Flinders Park, the tennis center, big crowds, and the Giants struggling to survive, got through, playing out of the glass house still. They really were the kind of ugly duckling of, Melbourne basketball at the time. So incredible effort for them to win this championship. I want to highlight a few guys. 50-point games that season. Kelvin Telford,
opener,
Andrew Gaze, and that 61-point night Shane Heal had in Townsville, 12 of 19 from 3. Triple doubles in 1994. Ricky Grace, Everett Stevens, dad of current Southeast Melbourne Phoenix man Kendall Stevens, Leroy Fisher, Adonis Jordan, remember him that year with the Magic, Derek Rucker playing for Newcastle, triple-double, also had a game where he had 24 points and 24 assists.
And led the league in assists. When we go back, and this is something that surprised me a little bit, I expected Darryl McDonald to lead the league in assists and steals, and the steals he did with remarkably 4.5 a game. But it did surprise me. Derek Rucker, 10.8 assists a game, leading the league in assists. And we know he's a superstar, so that didn't stun me that name was there, but I did expect it to be D-Mac leading the league.
Rob Rose also had a triple-double. 2 triple-doubles in the from D-Mac in the regular season. We'll get to the one he had in game 1. 25 points, 14 assists, 11 steals, and 7 rebounds in one. Almost a quadruple. Get this one.
Hit me.
17, 10, 15, and 9 steals. 1 steal off a quadruple double.
He was so much fun to watch. And he changed so much with the way that so many people in Australia watched basketball and generations played basketball. And he was a huge part of that North Melbourne team. Just quickly, want to hit rewind quickly. We have to at some point go back to probably Hammer's 61-point game in NBL Rewind and watch that. But that Kelvin Telford, that was an opener. Opening his NBL career, the same as Bobby Locke did, with huge games in another year with the Supercats. For Telford to come in and just go bang as an opener. And, of course, we're going to see NBL back in Tasmania in the not-too-distant future. What a way to introduce yourself to the league, Liam.
He was awesome. He was so fun to watch. Hey, can I also flag?
Yes.
Oh, we're talking about the Giants getting through to this grand final series, having only just survived the off-season. How about the Adelaide 36ers and their Super Sixers in 94?
Yes.
And their salary cap breaches. You on top of this?
A little bit.
They were handed a second set of fines by the NBL's Player Payments Committee following a series of, quote, inadvertent infractions.
Oh, yeah.
Was the terminology from the NBL, the league's salary cap. In total, the Sixers had to pay over $125,000 in fines and have their salary cap lowered. And Bill Palmer, the GM of the league at the time, said in future, breaches of the player payment rules will be treated with more seriousness. Why future?
That's what happens. The first person or team or club or franchise, they normally get a little slap on the wrist just to try and dissuade others. Mm-hmm. And then a second or third person or team or franchise come over the top and get whacked. But it was almost worth it because they nearly won a championship. They came so close.
What is an inadvertent infraction of the player payments rules, Cam, in your eyes?
I think... I don't want to say. If it was a different sport, it might include an extra paper bag, but I don't think this happened in this particular case. But either way, we will move on. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. Yeah, in the semifinals, anything else on the season before I just give you a quick rundown?
Go ahead.
Sydney and North Melbourne in the first round of the playoffs. Sydney won game 1 quite comfortably. North Melbourne forced a game 3 and were able to get through. The same with Adelaide. They played Brisbane in the first round of the finals. Of course, we had more teams back then. Best of 3, found themselves North Melbourne and the Southeast Melbourne Magic. Both came down to last-second shots. North Melbourne were able to get the sweep and get through. And Adelaide won game 1 in Adelaide, went to Melbourne for game 2 and were able to knock off the Melbourne Tigers in a sweep as well, which they were able to find their way through into a grand final. But one big thing happened in that game against Melbourne for Adelaide. Mark Davis dislocated his shoulder. And this is where I want to start. Are you ready to start the game?
Go ahead.
No strapping on said dislocated shoulder from a week earlier. We know how much of a man mountain he was. Chairman of the boards, and he just cleaned glass for his whole NBL career. And they got smacked on the boards in game 1, Adelaide. They got smacked. No coincidence that Mark Davis wasn't the Mark Davis that we know. But no strapping tape. Now, I can't remember exactly how much of there was a line ball decision of him playing. I highly doubt there was any chance he was going to miss. But the fact he rolled in off the bench with no tape on that shoulder and had 7 points and 3 boards in that first quarter was remarkable. That first thing that slapped me right in the face, Mark Davis cares little for Elastoplast.
Hard as nails, Mark Davis. And they tested him out too, didn't they? Early doors came in, hard foul underneath, wrenched that shoulder. And you saw one of the times when one of his trips to the free throw line, throwing that thing up short. And then my understanding is in game 2, it really wasn't up to scratch. He had an attempt from range that fell way short. And I saw some comments from Brett Brown saying that was the moment I knew he wasn't right. And as a result, we were good to go.
It's interesting the way that this game started. And we said this about the game we did last week in Perth. The stadium is rocking. The old Clipsal Powerhouse, that was a wonderful place to watch basketball and still is. WNBL, the Adelaide team still play there. But it just resonates through the speakers as you're watching this game. They were mad for it.
Yeah.
And even though they got blown out, the second quarter was all North Melbourne, opened up a 17-point halftime lead. It only took a couple of threes, and we'll get to Unsung Heroes in a moment, in the third quarter, and the joint was rocking again. It was very, very minimal lulls from a stadium and a crowd that were just hell-bent on having as much fun as possible.
They went absolutely nuts, especially down that fourth quarter because they were gone. Mate, 2 or 3 minutes to go. They were gone. Rob Rose, we'll get to him more in a minute, went ballistic. And as he did, it was a tidal wave of sound from the Adelaide fans in that Clipsal Powerhouse. Hey, can I just flag, great quote from Brett Brown ahead of game one, saying we're going to the big dance, and all of a sudden we have a chance to bring the hottest looking girl back home, and we're going to do that.
I like it. I want to. Something happened in this game, and I want to go. Actually, I should have mentioned this off the top. I mean no disrespect when I say that, and this is in all sports. I don't know a great deal of names of referees and officials and umpires and all the rest of it. So I'm not showing disrespect here. So I don't know the referee's name, but he changed the call. He made a call where it was a strip on Darryl McDonald and looked fairly clean from here. And he put his hand up and said, "My mistake, wrong call, clean swat. Adelaide get the ball from the sideline."
Fresh shot.
Now Mckay. It's back down to 11 points. Fouls on McDonald. That's his fourth personal.
Yeah. It'll go down the history books, won't it? Well, there you go. He made a mistake. He has said that McDonald stripped the ball. No foul. Sixers ball from the side. Most unusual.
It's the only time. This is a historic game because it's the only time. You know how we're always told referees never change their decision. I want to see someone in NBL 21 say, "Hang on a second. Back in '94, in Adelaide, there was, in fact, a decision that was changed. And congratulations and kudos to that referee, because I think that's history-making in not only basketball, but the world of sport.
What's more amazing than the fact that he changed the call is that you don't know Billy Mildenhall.
Well, no.
Are you serious?
No, hang on. I know who Billy Mildenhall was. I was so stunned at the time. I don't know a great deal of referees.
That's Billy.
Yeah, it was
That's the greatest of the greats.
I literally fell off my chair. So I apologize. So it was Billy. I apologize. It was very well refereed, as was what we spoke about last week. But there you go. There you go. Billy, who, of course, is a legend in the Hall of Fame. I apologize. But congratulations. The only history in the history of sport where referees made a decision and then changed it. Congratulations.
Hey, first thoughts?
First thoughts is that this North Melbourne team handled the crowd really, really well. Like we spoke about it. They came out, and that's a lot behind Darryl McDonald, and not dissimilar. And I think I mentioned this on NBL Overtime, that this team felt very similar to the Cairns Taipans from NBL 20, with Chardo quarterbacking, taking control, going into RAC Arena in big games, of course, semi compared to a grand final, but comparable when it comes to the crowd enthusiasm, and D-Mac just having control early. And then Paul Maley, and we'll get to a little more on him a little bit later on, but I thought Paul Maley's first quarter hits a three almost straight off the bat off a great curl screen, and D-Mac just slips it straight into his palms. Their ability to be able to handle the crowd early was a big one, and it allowed them to find their running groove a little more than Adelaide, I think.
Did they handle the crowd late? I mean, the Giants nearly peed this game down their pants, let's be honest. 17 up at halftime. Yeah, that second quarter was incredible. Dominant. 17 up at halftime. And then down the stretch, they just couldn't execute. They couldn't get anything going. They went very, very negative. And I think, actually, you talk about the Giants handling the crowd. I think the crowd had a major influence on this game down the stretch at both ends of the floor.
We have spoken ad nauseum about Melbourne United 16 up with 6 minutes to go this year against Sydney Kings. 3:45 on the clock, North Melbourne by 14. 3:45 on the clock. Now, they end up getting the win out. So, and this is something that surprised me going back and watching it on Rewind. This would have been one of the greatest chokes in NBL history had they not pulled this out in overtime, because they led by 14 with 3:45 on the clock. Rob Rose is a huge reason as to why.
Well, there you go. That leads me into my primary first thought. My big takeaway from this game: what an absolute stud Rob Rose was. Now we know that, right? Two-time MVP and a champion, 5-time All NBL first team. But when you go back and watch this game, 18 points in the fourth quarter. He had the eye of the tiger. Mark Beretta, the courtside reporter, even spoke about it during the game, saying, wow, he's got a look about him. I bumped into him. He means absolute business. Chewing his teammates out. You see him in the huddles, just like locked in, and almost single-handedly brought this team over the line. And, wow, what do you have? 33 points, 12 rebounds, 6 steals in the game. I mentioned 18 in the fourth quarter. He was unbelievable in his career, especially in this game.
He was unbelievably good in game 2 as well, where they got blown out, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. But people forget about this. He was brought in as that replacement import for the Southeast Melbourne Magic in 92. I think it was Milt Newton. They came in and struggled in the first 6 or 7 rounds, and Robert Rose comes in. And I remember an interview that he did straight up. They're in some old gym somewhere in Melbourne that looks like it only had a half court and half a rim that they gorged and had him working out in. And he says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And the harder he worked, as this game looked to be dead and buried, the luckier he got. And he nailed an unorthodox shooting style. But when he found Twine in those threes late, it did change the game. And in the end, he almost single-handedly carried this team to the win.
While we're on Rob Rose, I just want to go back to that 92 version of Rob Rose for the Southeast Melbourne Magic. Chatting with some of the guys that were on that team, it's interesting hearing their stories about him that year and the agreement that he got to with Brian Goorjian, where they eventually came to an understanding where for the first 43, 44 minutes of the ball game, move the ball, let's get everyone involved. Okay, cool. I'll do that. As long as you understand when it's crunch time, the ball is mine and it's my time to make plays. And I mean, that's just the kind of guy he was. Super, super clutch. It was interesting during the game, Paul Maley, and he went into the huddle prior to overtime and told the team, got all fired up and said, we're not losing this game. Jump on my back. I'm going to take us to the promised land. Came out and gave up a tee in the first possession.
What to do? Reedy, Maley. Up goes the shot for 2 off the glass. Won't go. Great rebound from Mckay. Now Adelaide have a chance to go in front.
A technical foul has been called on Paul Maley. Oh, boy. He was after the shot. He ran up the court. He was talking to referee Robbie Barnett, and he's got slapped with a tech.
And then, you want to talk about the referees? I mean, how did they get that wrong?
I don't know.
Ray Hunt was right in front of that play. How can you not? The guy's up faking, leaning in. How can you not be looking at where his foot is in such a massive moment?
Maley. Got to take it. Up goes the 3. Oh, balance, and he's nailed it.
Stayed behind the line. No.
And Maley cannot believe it. Look at this. Stayed and off balance.
It's a 2.
It's a 2.
And referee Ray Hunt called it as a 2. And that'll be adjusted. That is a 2-pointer. Great referee.
Some indecision here on, in fact, if it's a 3 or a 2. It definitely was a 2. Well, the referees are...
Well, they're going to stick with it.
They should come to us. We got the perfect answer. Let's have a look. Are they allowed to come here and look at the TV screen?
Well, you know, in a game like this, why not?
But you know what? This is something I was going to touch on with things we miss, but this goes across all sport. I actually legitimately think sport's better without technology.
They got it wrong. Move on.
They got it wrong. We moved on. And we all accepted. Players made the mistakes, coaches. And now with technology, and, you know, I'm as hard on referees and umpires and officials in all sports as a lot of people. But I legitimately think there was a Mark Leader 3 that the toe might have been on the line. You know, there was that Mark Davis. There was a correct call, that 2 that he hit that ends up tying it in overtime. The DMAC comes down the other end. No timeout, which I love from Brett Brown. But we would have stopped the game and gone and checked that at some point. Now, it's not the NBL's fault because it's in all sport right now, but it just flows so much better. There's hard fouls. We don't need to go and check for a couple of moments to see if there might have been, it needs to be upgraded. I was huge on technology coming in 5 years ago in all walks of life of sport. Now I'm watching this stuff. I'm like, just let them go. And in the end, I think Sport Karma and the basketball gods even it out, and it did in this particular game.
DMAC was another first thought of mine, obviously, because this game is remembered by the game-winning shot he hit. Man also had a triple-double. That flies under the radar. He had 17, 10, and 10 on this night. Also had 9 turnovers. It was a bit of a grind. They were throwing bodies at him left, right, and center, trying to get the ball out of his hands. But I think it flies under the radar. He had a triple-double in this game.
He's the best passer in NBL history?
Yep. I practiced with Dima as his teammate for a period of day after day after day. One thing I'll never forget he taught me, and when you hear this, that he said this, when you watch him play, you can't help but notice this every time he has the ball. He used to tell me as a point guard, he said, find the second pass. Well, what do you mean about that? He's like, when you're making a play, you put 2 feet in the paint, you're looking to set someone up. Everyone can see the first pass. Everyone can see the one that first comes into your vision. Find the second pass, the second option, and that's the one that you see that the defense doesn't, and that'll set you up. When you watch him play, especially, you know, when you watch him closely in this game, you see that time and time again, because as the viewer, your eyes go to where you think he's going to pass the ball, and he goes elsewhere.
There's one perfect example. He drives baseline, goes between the legs, which he loved to do, and he drew a couple of defenders. And a North Melbourne player actually cuts baseline, which everyone thinks he's going to go there. Yeah. And then he, at the last second, gives a no-look pass to Paul Maley, who was just standing by himself in the middle of the key, banks a little 8-footer in. And that's a perfect example there of how DMAC was able to do what he did for such a long period of time. And I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned this on NBL Overtime the other day when you spoke about Scott Machado, a multi-year deal, and then, of course, with Bryce Cotton being on a 3-year deal at the Wildcats. What I think makes this so fun to go back and watch is Robert Rose here for a long time, DMAC here for a long time, Mark Davis here for a long time, Paul Maley here for a long time. We had 4 imports that complemented, of course, it was a huge part of this series, the high class of Australian players that played. And the fact is, that's when we talk about the affinity with these imported players. And anyone who loves their hoops as much as you do, and so many people watching it right now, if those 4 names as Americans are mentioned to you, you're on a 10-minute conversation about how much you enjoyed either watching and supporting them as part of your team you love, or as an opponent who probably at a different time broke your heart.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And those guys obviously went on to have massive careers in our league. One thing, a great quote from DMAC recently, looking back on this year and talking back on that game, that championship, that year. We talk about Ty Wesley, and Corey's obviously often talking about grown man business, right? And guys with kids. Great quote from DMAC about looking back on this year. He said, I just came out here in 94 to keep a job. I'm a father at the time, and I've got 6 kids. I'm thinking about just supporting my family. And came out, tore the league up, and then set himself up for a very, very long career in this league.
And then, of course, some of those 6 kids end up playing in the league as well. All right, unsung heroes.
Let's start with Mike Mckay.
That's
Turn the game. I think when people think about the legends of this league, he gets forgotten a little bit because that man could shoot the heck out of the ball. And in this game, turned it with those back-to-back threes. Was it early in the third quarter?
Early in the third.
Went whackety-whack and got the crowd involved, and his teammates, rode the wave from there.
Had a lot of intensity as well. Him and Rod Johnson having a little chat earlier. I think it was in the first quarter or early in the second. He had the intensity. Played really well. Obviously, Boomer as well, represented the country. Played really well in the semi-final series against Melbourne the week before. So, huge part of that comeback. And I like the fact that Adelaide win the tip. And Brett Maher takes a shot within about 2 seconds to start the third quarter, nails a little mid-range jumper, and it changes everything. And you just feel the momentum start. You're like, you know what? Obviously, Mike Dunlap, who, of course, still a wonderful coach in the collegiate ranks now, he didn't go in at halftime and tell these guys or suggest they should go into their shells. He was somehow able to say, we can still win this game. And I thought Brett Maher set the tone from that very early 3 seconds in the third quarter, and then Mike Mckay went bang.
Interesting tidbit about Brett Maher with this team that season. Obviously, he's young Brett Maher, right? He's just starting to come into his own as a superstar in this league. But Mike Dunlap started a young Brett Maher over Phil Smythe, who was, so Phil Smythe's coming off the bench as Brett Maher's backup. Phil Smythe was still the starting point guard for the Boomers. And he's coming off the bench. You want to talk about unsung heroes. He was big in this game, Phil Smythe. He was, and they talked about it on the call, he was their best defender on DMAC. Did a great job. I was shocked he wasn't guarding DMAC down the stretch, and that Maher was. And made some huge plays. And every time Smythe was on the floor, the ball popped a little bit better for the Sixers.
Defensive Player of the Year in 1989, Phil Smythe, which a lot of people probably do forget. Something just on Phil Smythe. Like when I was watching it, and I knew he was part of that World Championship team in '94 that Australia played, and we know a fair bit about that. I thought, geez, Phil Smythe at the age of 47, still starting point guard for Australia. And then when I went back, he's actually, now we're both 39, he's actually in this game, he's 3 years younger than what we currently are, Liam.
Yeah. I know it's...
Phil Smythe, look, obviously a legend of Australian basketball, but for someone who's not overly aesthetically pleasing like myself, it did make me feel good just for a couple of seconds that Phil Smythe looked a lot older than I do, and I'm still 3 years older than him at the current time.
Yes, although playing way better ball than you could even dream of doing at any point in your entire life.
That's also true.
What about, this was his second last season.
Yeah, because he went to Sydney, didn't he?
He went to Sydney, played 1 year, and then that was that. But in this game, in this championship series, he was still balling.
He was really good against DMAC. My unsung hero, I'm not here to start a huge argument. My unsung hero is Paul Rees. Okay? Was really good. Was the most valuable player for the series.
We need to talk about that.
He was not the most valuable player for the series. I would have given it to Paul Maley. I thought he was brilliant in both games. DMAC was great. I just think it was either Maley or DMAC. And I actually liken Paul Rees. And I don't want to... He was great. He was great. But I think what happened in this series is that people who voted, whoever that might have been, same way as they voted Andre Iguodala the MVP of the NBA in 2015 finals, he played higher than we expected. Yep. But he was no way the best player in this series for North Melbourne. Was he critical and crucial at different times? Yes. Should he have been the most valuable player? No. So he's the unsung hero in my mind.
You're right. You're also wrong.
Go on.
Because there's no doubt about it. DMAC should have been the grand final MVP of this series.
Okay.
Probably should have been the MVP of the season. Was runner-up best defensive player. In this series, the man had a triple-double in game one and the game-winning bucket. And, I mean, everything that... all those guys are getting open because of DMAC.
Yeah.
Not just him throwing, because the numbers that the Sixers are throwing at him. He comes out in game two. It was a struggle, like that they were pounding him and whacking him and banging him and fouling him. They had a double-double, 11 points, 10 assists. They won this grand final. They won this championship because of DMAC.
I agree. So there you go. I want to make Paul Maley another unsung hero as well because I thought he was brilliant. He was really good early, hit a couple of early threes, got him going. And any single time that they netted a bucket, and granted, as you just touched on, a lot of it come from the hand of DMAC previously, but I thought Paul Maley was brilliant in this series.
He was knocked down. It was interesting going back and watching it. He was more knocked down than I remember him to be, and come out in that game, won 25 points. Another unsung hero for the Giants, Adelaide's free throw shooting. Oh my goodness.
You know, I actually started to feel really sorry for Scott Ninnis. Really sorry for him.
He was broke.
Yeah.
He was broke. Yeah, went 0 for 4. And those one-on-ones, as you spoke about last week, they were a killer, missing the front end of those. 21 of 37 from the line as a team. Rose, Ninnis, and Chris Blakemore, fun to watch him again, combined for 7 of 18 from the free throw line.
We won't be, of course, as we spoke about last week, we're going to be hitting the Barossa Valley with Scott Ninnis at some point in the near future. So this is one of the things we will not be bringing up. because I actually did feel sorry for him for a short amount of time. But he obviously...
Hey, had a big bucket, though. The running hook across the lane.
Which was directly after the foul shot. So he misses those 4 foul shots. He looks like he just wants to leave Clipsal. And then all of a sudden he comes down in between 3 defenders and drops a running skyhook. And everyone's like, what the hell just happened? But it did look cool.
Shades of Reece Carter coming across the lane with the running hook. And it was a big bucket. And Scott Nennis, like, if a man has ever worn his heart on his sleeve, like that guy, like his expressions during the game are fun to watch.
Any other unsung heroes before we get to things we miss?
No, we hit my guys. The refs. The refs are an unsung hero for the Giants because they gave that 3 ball. They gave Maley 3 on that bucket.
Yeah, that's true. Can you just explain the Super Sixer thing? Because I remember that it was a thing, right? So they weren't the 36ers at this particular time. They were the Super Sixers. Do you know exactly why? It was definitely just, okay, cool.
Eagle Super.
I figured that was the case because it was obviously on the court as well. But
Eagle Super.
Yeah. Super Sixers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There you go. All right. Things we miss. I'm going to open this. I'm a shoe guy. All right. I'm a shoe guy. I'm a big Nike guy. This shoe game from both of these units were brilliant. They were both Nike. And I'm a Nike guy. They were both Nike teams, which was pretty rare back in the NBL in the 90 or at least 94 season. But the shoe game on there, like D-Mac wearing those sweet Barclays, Chris Blakemore wore the Barclays. Like, it was just legit. And there's an NBL sneakers page on Instagram. He'll no doubt will be all over this. The shoe game of these two teams was very, very high.
Okay. Yeah. Not, I didn't notice. I'm going to take your word for it. But the shoe, I mean, this was my era of shoes. So
that's true. And look, I'll tell you what, someone who knows fashion, of course, I've got the cardigan on today.
Oh, you've got the cardi. I like that. Things I miss. Hey, those Giants uniforms.
I love them.
So nice. Obviously an absolute complete rip off of the Charlotte Hornets and what they were doing at the time with Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson and Muggsy Bogues and the like. But I mean, to go from that maroon and yellow kind of get up that they had, complete new look. They go down as one of the greatest uniforms in NBL history. I miss D-Mac and Rob Rose, obviously, when the absolute 2 superstars of the league. I miss the Giants altogether. They were fun to have around. And I miss Chris Blakemore. Gone too soon. Gone too soon. And hey, how's this for a comparison with Chris Blakemore? He reminds me of Anthony Mason. He's the NBL version of Anthony Mason with that big barrel chest.
Yeah, big boy.
Has the ability to put it on the deck, a little outside, inside, and just push guys around. But issues with knee injuries and other things off the court wrapped his career up too soon. Not
just him on the court, 0-0. Don't say it enough in the NBL. And I want to see we've seen 0 at Chul this year at Melbourne United War, but I think that might have been a commercial agreement with the TAC. So I think there was something to do with towards 0. But yeah, 0-0, something you rarely see in the NBL. And straight out to you boys and girls in WNBL, I want to see someone wear 0-0 next year and give a shout out to Chris Blakemore.
Also miss great nicknames. We don't do that as well in the NBL as we used to. Obviously, the General is involved in this game, one of the all-time great NBL nicknames. Also, the Terminator.
Yeah.
Andrew Spaldenis.
Yes. He actually played well. And he played well in the semi-final series as well.
No.
Right. Yes.
He was horrible in this game.
I didn't think he was I thought he was all right.
He was a foul a minute.
He did get fouled out pretty quickly.
Couldn't get his rhythm going. Came out and played really well in game 2.
But he's not really a rhythm guy. He just comes in, beats some people up. And if you look at the time he came on, it actually is not dissimilar to when they started to play. And in that case, Brett Wheeler as well came in, played some minutes, and actually wasn't too bad as well.
Shout out to Brett Wheeler, teammate of mine at the Victoria Titans. He played really good minutes.
He did. On-floor timeouts.
Yep.
I miss them. I want to see players to be able to make the decision. Now, a lot of them are obviously instructed by the coach, but I would like to see in a double team, you got nowhere to go. Do you take a timeout and risk getting chewed out by the coach? Or do you actually try and find a little bit harder to try and find a teammate? I like the on-floor timeout. And we've seen it a little bit in this game, and I'd like to see it again.
While we're talking about timeouts, can we segue from that into the final play?
Go on.
You talked about how there was no timeout. I watched, not only did I watch the game, I went and watched One Giant Leap which was the kind of year in reflection of the Giants. Great little documentary. You can find it on YouTube. If you enjoyed the game, go back and watch that. And D-Mac explained, because you could see him at the top of the play here talking to Brett Brown, right? And he looks back, turns his head away from the defender, which is a very dangerous thing to do in that situation. He talks about why he was doing that, and he was trying to find out time and score. He didn't know whether this game was tied or whether they were in the lead. And then once he saw that the game was tied, and he thought, all right, I got to make a play here. And then love his comments after the game where he's like, hey, make a play. I miss, we go to OT, I win, I make it, we win. I was good to go.
Scores a level. It was a 2-point shot. So again, North Melbourne will have the last play in this first period of overtime. McDonald can win the game for North Melbourne. So it's come down to the last shot again.
He's got to go, he's got to go!
McDonald.
He wants to draw the foul!
Up goes the shot! Makes it!
What a shot!
And the game is over! McDonald has won the game for North Melbourne on the buzzer in the first period of overtime.
I didn't know how much time was on the clock, so I turned to look at the clock, see how much time was left. I seen 13 seconds, and then I'm thinking, are we down or is it tied up? So I turned to look again, and it was tied up, and it was only 7 seconds. So I'm thinking, well, I'm going to the rack. They're going to have to stop me. And I'm surprised they didn't send nobody at me. They was doubling me, not all night, but, when I go to the hole, somebody had stepped in, so I had to get rid of it. And they didn't. And that pretty much surprised me. So I just got in the paint, took the shot. Fortunately, it dropped.
They actually had about 5 opportunities to win it in regulation. D-Mac missed that little floater, and then Maley, and it was about 5 or 6 different hands. It kept belting the ball up volleyball style towards the rim and couldn't in the end. And we end up in overtime. I just want to trash talk. I miss trash talk. We don't see it enough in the NBL. There was a little bit going on early. Anytime there's any type of talk today, the referees get involved and separated. We've seen it with Randall and Casper Ware a couple of seasons ago. I just want to see the referees allow these guys to have a bit of competitive juices. Now, if it steps over the line and starts to get physical, which it didn't in this particular game, but, sometimes just a little bit of trash talk just adds so much to the intensity of the contest. And I think that in all sport as well. I think it gets stamped out.
Did we see a lot of it in this game?
We did a little bit early, in particular in that second quarter when North was starting to really get going. Mike Mckay and Rod Johnson, who I thought was really good. He was the perfect shooting guard for Darryl McDonald in this particular team. So there's a little bit there. Just on that, I miss documentaries. I miss NBL documentaries. Obviously, they were big in the 90s, and there used to be a lot of them. And we don't see a great deal of them right now. There was one a couple of years ago when Melbourne United won. This is a shameless plug because it was a huge part of it, called Dreams and Nightmares. Go check it out on YouTube. It's actually really well done by the United crew. But I'd like to see them happen a little bit more. These happened in the 90s as one giant leap, as you touched on.
I think we're going to see a couple of really interesting documentaries come out of the NBL 20 season just quietly. I understand there's one that's been put in place following the entire league over the whole course of the season. And when you think about all the roller coaster ride of a year that we just had and the next stars and the like, that's going to be fascinating. But also one that was being put together by Sky Sport New Zealand following the Breakers from pre-season and the trip to the States and RJ Hampton and Rod Hampton and the whole, Glenn Rice Jr., the whole thing. That's going to be fun.
Remember we spoke about this on NBL Overtime, and I said this would be an outstanding documentary. If they were able to follow, I don't know, Glenn Rice Jr. into Gilligan's in Cairns and just find out exactly what went down over those 5 or 6 hours, it's going to be must-watch TV. And the league one is going to be really interesting because I don't know anything really about it, but if they've somehow allowed cameras in some respect into the conversations around how they come to the decision around Perth Wildcats being the champions. Imagine the drama, the intrigue, the conversations. Now, I'm not suggesting that the entire thing should have been filmed, but imagine them sitting there and watching that. Larry and Jeremy.
Did you notice when Jeremy Lowliger came and came onto NBL Overtime that day to explain? Did you notice the extra cameras there? That's who that crew was.
course, I noticed the extra cameras there. I was there.
Oh, I know, but
I thought they were
but that's the documentary that they're putting together on NBL 20.
All right, do you want to do Beyond the Box Score, or where are they now first?
Probably Beyond the Box Score.
All right, hit me.
What's up with the bunch of brooms in the crowd? Did you notice them?
Yeah, actually,
a lot of brooms
They cut
when
to
you
one,
haven't won a game in the series.
They cut to one really early after somebody hits a three from Adelaide, and there's just one person stands up with a broom. I actually just thought it was the janitor or clean event there a little early.
Just before overtime, there was a wide shot, and there's a whole there's about 5 brooms in a single section, guys holding them up. You haven't won a game in the series. What are you bringing the broom out for?
You know what? To quote our man Corey Homicide Williams, speak it into existence. Maybe that's what they were doing in '94. Mm-hmm. But before The Secret and all those, those books and self-help, maybe they were like, you know what? It was a small group of Adelaide Super Sixers fans that thought, we're going to talk this thing. We're going to talk a sweep into existence. Mm-hmm. Go down to the reject shop, pick up a couple of $2 brooms, and head to the Clipsal Powerhouse. That's all I can make of that.
Brett Brown's tie. Can we talk about that?
Go on.
Horrific.
Yeah, but yet again, I'm the fashionista here. A lot of the mid-90s outside of the shoes was horrific. Mm-hmm. Although, when you say that, the uniforms, in particular for North Melbourne, were really nice. The shoes were really nice. So maybe it wasn't all bad, but yeah, Brett Brown's had some interesting outfits, as all did all coaches at that time of year.
Brett Brown, what a legend. So that obviously this was his championship, and the poise he showed throughout this game when they were, really struggling down the stretch and the crowd was going crazy and everything. He was, for a guy who was coaching a team that had 2 or 3 guys older than him on the roster, a bunch of veterans guys, Larry Sangstock, Mark Leader, Daryl Pearce, and then he's got this brand new brash point guard. He just did a masterful job that year.
I just want to make mention of the Adelaide fans and how fun. Now, they didn't win a championship in these particular years. They did later in the decade when Darnell, me and Kevin Brooks got there. They were able to watch this particular team make a grand final. And then a couple of years later, they had Rick Brunson and Leon Trimingham as their 2 imports, ended up making a semi-final. So Mike Dunlap's recruiting, both of imported players and Australians, was not a huge surprise considering obviously where he is now and where he's been, obviously, in between the Adelaide and into the NBA and back to college now. But, yeah, this would have been a fun time to be an Adelaide fan. Didn't quite get early in the decade what you would have been wanting to do, but that 10 years to be a Super Sixer or a 36er fan would have been a great deal of fun.
Both coaches went on to coach in the NBA.
NBA, yeah.
Pretty amazing.
How about Mike Dunlap putting 5 guards on the court?
Loved it.
Possession. Yeah, it was great for us 2 guards. This is where basketball should be. But, yeah, and it was huge. And I think Robert Rose got an and 1 off it. They just spaced the floor and said, do whatever the hell you want, guys. And Rob Rose did that as he traditionally did.
I thought it was kind of interesting piecing all the people together in terms of where things went from there. So you got Phil Smythe out there backing up Brett Maher. He went on to then coach that club to a number of championships, with Brett Maher doing his thing on that team and being essentially the leader of that team. Steve Breeny was Brett Brown's assistant in this championship, was Phil Smythe's assistant throughout that time in Adelaide, and Paul Rees, the big fella grand final MVP, was a part of those championships for the 36ers.
And Scott Ninnis, of course, coached Adelaide as well, 10, 15 years after. Well, it would have been 15, but maybe 10 or 12 years after. Just on, is it legit? We went on this earlier with the teal. I think that, and of course, it's so very hard to make differences to your uniform and all the rest of it. I'd like to see someone go and do it this year. And it might, in fact, be Melbourne United Heritage Round. They bring back the teal. But I would like to see the teal back in the NBL in 21 and hopefully beyond. Because I actually really like the colour, and it breaks it up being, traditional, the black, the white, or the dark blue, whatever it might be that so many of the clubs have.
Beautiful uniform. One of the all-time greats.
I agree. 5 guards. Yeah, I've got to say it again. This would have been one of the all-time chokes. I've got the notes here of the differences in the fourth quarter, because when Adelaide gave themselves a chance and then looked like they was kind of done, Rob Rose rips into Brett Maher, who gets subbed out, and then they're 14 down, and then Rob Rose hits a couple of big threes, and the whole thing changes. So, got to say, in the end, if you win, it's not a choke, but it was close.
This must have been a tough rewatch for the Adelaide fans, especially those in the building, because they thought they had it.
Oh.
When everything was going their way, when Rose was knocking down everything he touched, Mark Davis hits that shot. And not only was this game ripped away from them, I think they feel like with that Mark Davis injury in the finals, this championship was ripped away from them.
They were absolutely smacked on the boards, which is just a direct correlation to Mark Davis not being anywhere near 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to say, how many in the stadium? I think there was 8,200 capacity. Couldn't get a ticket probably for 3 days they sold out in 15 minutes. How many of the 8,200 in the joint thought that Mark Davis shot was a 3?
Probably a lot.
But the amount of mid-range jumpers in this game. Now, his foot was clearly on the line. But now today, a player, and this is all basketball, would take that little step back to make sure they were shooting a three-pointer, even if it hurt their rhythm just a little bit. Catch and shoot. Pat Reedy, Maley. These guys just caught. If they were comfortable, they were in the right shooting position, they would take it. Except for Rod Johnson, who didn't even have to have his feet at the rim, facing towards the rim, to jack up some type of shot. And a lot of times it went in.
Or Mike Mckay was similar down the other end. But I just keep coming back to that Maley 3 that was a 2. Because if that was the right call, D-Mac has the ball 1 point down.
Yeah.
And as you know, it's a whole different ball game.
I still think
so much more pressure when it's win or lose than whether it's win or OT. Does he make that shot? He probably does. It's a different situation.
No doubt. And there is no more intense pressure than scoreboard pressure. But I do think he goes ahead and makes that shot. All right, where are they now? You seem to know where everyone is, but I couldn't find. I really wanted to find where Rod Johnson was, because Rod and Terry Johnson were two of my favourite players, mainly because they didn't have a great deal of conscience. And when I was growing up, neither did I. I just jacked everything. So, but I couldn't find where Rod Johnson is.
Paul Maley, executive. What is he?
He went close to home.
Of Basketball Australia.
He was the acting CEO for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, if you look at the imports, Darryl McDonald and Paul Maley, both for the Giants, are very, very, very visual in Australian basketball circles.
Yeah, Mark Leader coaching in Geelong. And, yep. Let's take a different tact.
Mm-hmm.
See if we can get some people, some viewers, some listeners to help us out with a bit of where are they now for some of these guys.
Please.
Oh, where's the Terminator?
I like to think that he's just in a gym somewhere just working out. Like, just imagine him right now in self-isolation just going, hey, push-up challenge, 200 straight. That's what I like to think. And I reckon Chris Blakemore's there with him as well.
Yeah.
They're on Instagram together, tagging each other in, just doing push-up after push-up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Someone tagged me in the push-up challenge the other day. Don't bother.
Not happening.
Not a chance.
Yeah, well, this was a great game. This was, and I hope it was enjoyable for the old Giants supporters as well. We know there's a whole bunch of them, but this year for them was incredible to go from being about to be kicked out of the league or fall out of the league to winning the title for a team that was given no respect, picked to finish somewhere between 6th and 8th before the season, too old, too small, too slow. They had Larry Sangstock's tipping off man was played in the 1979 grand final. He's their starting center of this team. They were given no respect. When they won the semi-finals against Southeast Melbourne Magic, which was a emotional series, a spiteful series.
No doubt.
D-Mac's in the locker room saying, we can play. We can play. We're in the grand final for a reason. That was a big driving force for them, that they were given no respect. They were a Cinderella team. To go from all of that to winning the title, what a ride that was for the Giants fans.
And while the ending in 1995 wasn't as sweet, losing a grand final series in 3 to Perth, they went so close. They won game 1 on the road. I think there was a venue availability issue in Perth, so game 1 had to be in Perth, which is probably the more fair of the 3-game system. But they had game 1 in Perth, which North Melbourne rolled on in and beat them, and had a home court to win game 2 and win the championship. And Perth were able to do, as they still do in 2020, get the win on the road and then ended up blowing them out in game 3. But this was a 2-year ride that was full of highs.
Spoke to Ricky Grace about that 95 championship a little while ago. I was talking to him about going over and playing the Rockets and the McDonald's Open. And he said, hey, that championship series was personal for me because as the point guard, this was my league. It was my league. Rucker, Butch Hayes, all these guys were coming in and, okay, they might have been winning individual awards. I was going out there and winning championships. It was understood that I was the best point guard in the land. And then Darryl McDonald arrived in 1994, took his team to the title. And for me, he said 95 was all about gaining that mantle back and reestablishing myself as the best point guard in the land.
You know who North Melbourne played in their first game in 94 with DMAC, first game in the league?
Talk to me.
They played the Perth Wildcats and Ricky Grace annihilated him. Now, obviously changed and DMAC became who he was and what the year it was. But, yeah, the way that things go full circles. Game 1, Perth, great, of course, coming off a championship, Ricky Grace, and then goes to 95 and doing the way he did. We haven't really spoken much about Game 2. 117-97, big win for the Giants. It was party time. You mentioned earlier Mark Davis wasn't anywhere near the fitness that he needed to be and had been, and, you know, obviously was a huge part of them getting to where they got. Rob Rose was outstanding, but he was really the only Adelaide play that had a big night while North Melbourne partied their way, and it was a party. That fourth quarter, if you go back and watch it, that fourth quarter of the Glass House, realisation of a championship emotional night, and in the end, they swept them in 2-0.
You talk about Rob Rose was outstanding again. Another 30-point game for him. I think, what do you have, 31 in game 2. This is a perfect example of, I mean, Rob Rose was the MVP of the grand final series.
That's true. He was the best player, no doubt.
He was the best player. But they obviously, often is the case, you don't want to give it to someone on the losing team. So if it's not Rob Rose, it had to be DMAC.
Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. Where are they now? If you know where anyone in this particular game was, make sure you hit us up at NBL. Hashtag NBL Rewind. Any last thoughts?
What next? What game next? I think we've got to go a bit further back. We've got to go out of the 90s.
Do you want to go to the 79 grand final?
I don't know. Hit us up.
Hit us up. Because it's all up to you fans at home. And, of course, we hope you're staying safe as we're all in these self-isolation times as well. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. Don't forget NBL Overtime back next Tuesday night. Adam Gibson. And if you haven't checked it out yet, Gibbo and CJ Bruton go one-on-one as well. You can check it out. NBL Podcast on iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, and all the rest of it. But, yeah, hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. We won't do it next couple of weeks, but we will probably almost guarantee do that Houston Rockets Perth Wildcats game. Point. And I think we'll do the Melbourne United Oklahoma City Thunder game from NBA v NBL a couple of years ago where, of course, a blatant refereeing error may have cost Melbourne getting that win. Either way, that's all coming your way. Hashtag NBL Rewind. Liam, as always, thanks, mate.
Thank you.